The clang of dishes, the hiss of frying oil, and the low hum of old rock and roll filled the air as Kelsey Thompson tied her apron behind her back. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and the Florida sun was already creeping through the diner's fogged-up windows. Another long day awaited her at Bayfront Diner, a 50-year-old greasy spoon tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered nightclub on a side street in downtown Miami. With pale blue booths, chipped counters, and an old-fashioned soda machine that barely worked. The place had a charm that tourists called retro and locals simply called cheap. Kelsey, 27 years old, knew every inch of it. She'd been waiting tables there since she was 22. The job meant to be temporary, but turning permanent as life got in the way. Her dreams of moving to New York and studying theater faded beneath rent payments, credit card debt, and her mother's worsening health. Some mornings, she felt like the floor beneath her feet was made of concrete, dragging her down with every step. She started with her regulars, an older couple who ordered 2 coffees and 1 shared slice of apple pie, then moved on to a rowdy group of construction workers who wanted eggs not too runny but not dry, got it? She smiled, nodded, wrote the orders down like muscle memory. By 8 o'clock, the diner was full. Tourists wandered in, confused by the lack of QR codes and vegan options. Kelsey had little patience for them these days. She wasn't always like this. Once, she found joy in the chaos, in making strangers feel welcome, in swapping life stories with retirees from Ohio and single moms from Little Havana. But after months of financial stress, after watching her mother's prescriptions double in price, and her car break down twice in the same week, something in her had hardened. Now, every forced smile felt like a lie. Every request for no onions or extra syrup chipped away at her goodwill. It wasn't their fault, but it didn't matter. She was tired. Around 9 o'clock, the front door creaked open again. Kelsey didn't look up right away. She was mid-shift, mid-thought, and mid-pour on a coffee refill when she noticed a figure standing near the host stand, scanning the booths with a casual air. He looked like a tourist. Flip-flops, baggy shorts, a T-shirt that had definitely seen better days, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. She caught a glimpse of a wide grin and immediately bristled. He took a seat by the window, not waiting to be shown to the table. That annoyed her more. Some people walked in like they owned the place, like it was a casual beach bar and not a place where she was juggling 12 tables and 2 broken syrup dispensers. She grabbed a menu with a sigh and walked over, already irritated. He greeted her with a warm hello, his accent thick, maybe Spanish or Portuguese, she couldn't tell, and his voice light, like someone who had never known a bad day. She didn't return the smile. "Menu's already on the table," she said curtly, nodding toward it without making eye contact. He blinked, then chuckled softly. "Ah, thank you," he said, still polite. Kelsey didn't ask if he wanted coffee. She didn't offer recommendations. She didn't care. He looked like every other vacationer who wandered in wearing cheap sunglasses and asking for pancakes at lunchtime. A man with nothing on his mind but sun, sand, and selfies. Miami was full of them, and Kelsey had run out of patience long ago. Still, something about him stuck in her mind. Maybe it was the way he looked around the room, not with boredom or disinterest, but curiosity, as if every detail, the wobbly ceiling fan, the framed newspaper clippings on the wall, the waitress with the scowl, was worth noticing. That made her more annoyed. Why should he get to enjoy anything when she was drowning in stress and heat? He raised his hand, gently, to get her attention. Kelsey walked over, pen ready, her tone flat. "What can I get you?" He smiled again, tapping the laminated menu. "What's your most traditional dish here?" "Something very American." She rolled her eyes, not bothering to hide it. "This ain't a food tour," she snapped. "Just order something." He looked surprised for a second. Then he nodded, unfazed. "Okay, pancakes. And eggs, please." "Thank you." Kelsey scribbled down the order and turned away without another word. Behind her, the man leaned back in his seat, relaxed as ever, watching the morning unfold like he had nowhere else to be. To him, maybe this diner was just another quirky stop in an easy life. To Kelsey, he was just another interruption, one more stranger expecting kindness she could no longer afford to give. She didn't know his name. Didn't care, really. But the tension lingered in the air as she passed by his booth again and again, each time pretending not to see his calm expression or hear his quiet "thank you" when she refilled his water. What she didn't notice, not yet, were the sidelong glances from a few other customers, the hushed conversations, the subtle double takes as people slowly realized something about the man didn't quite fit the picture of an anonymous tourist. But Kelsey was too deep in her own storm to notice the one quietly building around her. The breakfast rush was beginning to thin out. A few customers lingered, sipping their refills, checking phones, or leafing through local newspapers while the kitchen buzzed behind the counter. Kelsey moved through the diner with her notepad tucked into her apron, her steps quick and sharp. She kept catching glimpses of the man in the corner booth, still wearing that unfazed expression as if her earlier attitude hadn't registered at all. That irritated her more than it should have. Most tourists either argued back or became passive-aggressively polite. This guy just smiled like he was on vacation from judgment itself. When the order for pancakes and eggs came up, Kelsey grabbed the plate with practiced ease and walked it over. She set the dish down with a quiet clatter and no eye contact. "There you go." The man looked up with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much," he said, his accent as warm as before. "Looks very good." Kelsey gave the faintest nod and turned to walk away, but his voice caught her again. "Excuse me," he said, gesturing gently toward the plate. "Do you have, how do you say, syrup? For this?" Kelsey stopped mid-step, turned halfway back, and offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's syrup on the table." He followed her gaze, locating the bottle tucked behind the napkin dispenser. "Ah, okay," he said, nodding with appreciation. "Sorry, my English not perfect." "It's fine," she said flatly, already halfway back to the kitchen. But the voice in her head didn't stop. "If it's fine, why are you so tense?" She pushed the thought down. It didn't matter. He was one customer. Just another plate, another tip, or not. Probably not, given how he was dressed. She bet he wouldn't leave more than $1. Back at the counter, Rosa, another waitress who worked the morning shifts, leaned over and whispered, "That guy seemed sweet. You get the good ones today." Kelsey rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "Sweet doesn't pay rent." Rosa raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Everyone had their moods. Rosa had seen Kelsey ride the waves of burnout for months. She just didn't know how far it had dragged her down. Meanwhile, the man continued eating with simple enjoyment, oblivious to the undercurrents around him. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rush. Every few minutes, he'd look around the diner with soft curiosity, as though the place had stories to tell and he was there to listen. Eventually, he stood and walked over to the counter, placing a $20 bill gently beside the register. "Thank you again," he said to Kelsey. "Very nice food." Kelsey gave a tight-lipped yeah and began punching in the payment, but he lingered a second longer. "Do you like soccer?" he asked suddenly, with that same patient smile. She looked up, taken off guard. "What?" "Soccer," he repeated. "Football in Brazil. Do you like?" Kelsey blinked. The only soccer she ever paid attention to was whatever made it into headlines during World Cup years. It wasn't something she cared about. "Still," she replied without emotion. "Not really." The man gave a gentle shrug and smiled again. "Okay," he said. "Maybe someday." He nodded once, then walked out slowly, pushing the door open with his shoulder. The bell above it jingled faintly. Outside, the Miami heat wrapped around him like a blanket. As the door swung closed behind him, Kelsey stared at the $20 bill he'd left. She flipped it over and found another folded beneath it. Another $20, $40. She frowned. People didn't usually tip that much for bad service. Certainly not when they were spoken to the way she'd spoken to him. It wasn't guilt money either. He hadn't seemed uncomfortable, hadn't tried to compensate for anything. He had just tipped her well, like it was nothing. She slipped the bills into the register with a strange knot forming in her stomach. A few minutes later, as she cleared his booth, wiping down the syrup-smudged table, she noticed the air in the diner beginning to shift. A couple of teenage boys had walked in, unusual for this time of morning. They didn't sit. Instead, They peered around until one of them pointed outside with wide eyes. "Dude, he's still out there." Kelsey paused, turning slightly toward the window. The man was standing just down the sidewalk, leaned casually against the brick wall of the building, smiling as the teenagers ran out to greet him. She watched them excitedly shake his hand and ask for a selfie. Within 5 minutes, 2 more kids showed up, then 3 more, then a group of adults with phones out, approaching slowly, as if verifying something they had just Googled. The man greeted each of them with calm enthusiasm, nodding politely, laughing with them, signing napkins and receipts, and even one soccer ball someone had brought. Kelsey stared. Something wasn't adding up. She walked over to the counter again, still watching through the window. Rosa had come up beside her. "Wait a second," Rosa said slowly. "That guy—" Kelsey turned toward her. "You recognize him?" Rosa narrowed her eyes, chewing her lip. "I think I saw him on the news last year. Or maybe YouTube. I don't know, but he looks familiar." Kelsey glanced back outside. The man was now surrounded by a growing crowd, still smiling, still humble. Not once did he raise his voice or show impatience. The teenage boys from earlier came back inside, faces flushed with excitement. "You guys know who that is?" One of them asked loudly. "That's Ronaldinho Gaucho." Kelsey turned sharply. "Who?" The boy laughed like she had told a joke. "Ronaldinho? You're kidding, right? He's a soccer legend. Like, one of the greatest players in the world. He's from Brazil." Kelsey stared blankly. The kid blinked. "You seriously don't know Ronaldinho?" "I don't follow soccer," she said, more defensive than she intended. "Well," he said, looking back toward the door, "you might want to Google him. You kind of just gave attitude to a living icon." The boys left again, running toward the crowd. Kelsey stood in place, jaw tight, chest buzzing with unease. The name still meant nothing to her, but the reaction unfolding outside said everything. She moved back behind the counter, picked up her phone, and typed in Ronaldinho Gaucho. The search results hit like a slap. Images of packed stadiums, dazzling footwork, gleaming trophies. Highlight reels with millions of views. Smiling photos with world leaders, celebrities, children. The headlines told the rest. Ballon d'Or winner, 2-time FIFA World Player of the Year, World Cup champion, and now, apparently, casual diner guest. Kelsey set the phone down slowly, her hands slightly trembling. She had just dismissed, mistreated, one of the most celebrated athletes in the world like he was just another lazy tourist. And worse than that, she had ignored his kindness. She wasn't sure yet what the consequences of that would be. But the crowd outside was growing fast, and the whisper her gut told her this day was far from over. Kelsey hovered near the kitchen pass-through, pretending to organize order slips while her mind churned. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, where the crowd around the man, Ronaldinho, apparently, was growing by the minute. A few customers inside the diner had started whispering among themselves, their heads turning toward the window and then back to their phones, clearly connecting the dots faster than she had. One man even stood up, walked out with a coffee to go, and returned 15 minutes later holding a crumpled napkin with what looked like a signature on it. He was smiling like he had just met royalty. Kelsey didn't know what she felt. Embarrassment, obviously, but something heavier too, a kind of internal sinking. The realization that she had been careless, not just rude, but dismissive in a way that went deeper than tone. She had sized someone up in seconds and decided he was unworthy of respect. And now, the consequences were not theoretical. They were walking into the diner one by one, phones in hand, faces lit with curiosity, asking questions she wasn't prepared to answer. At booth 5, a woman in her 40s, sunglasses perched on her head, fresh manicure, dressed like a tourist who knew how to spend money, leaned forward and tapped her fingers against the table as Kelsey approached with a coffee pot. "Refill?" Kelsey asked, trying to keep her voice even. The woman didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head and studied Kelsey with a slow, deliberate curiosity that made her stomach twist. "Sure," the woman finally said. "But can I ask you something?" Kelsey nodded cautiously. "Do you even know who that is?" the woman whispered, nodding toward the window. Kelsey gave a hesitant shrug. I do now. The woman's brows lifted. And yet you still talk to him like that? Kelsey's jaw clenched, her hand tightening on the coffee pot. I didn't know who he was when he came in. Still, the woman said, her voice not cruel but piercing, you don't need to know someone's name to treat them with decency. Kelsey didn't answer. She just poured the refill and moved on. The next few minutes blurred into a haze of side eyes, hushed comments, and a distinct sense that her every move was being measured against something larger than herself. Ronaldinho hadn't come back inside yet, but his presence still dominated the room. Customers kept checking their phones, watching videos of him laughing outside, signing autographs. The diner's Wi-Fi, usually ignored, was suddenly under strain as more people connected and started sharing footage. Mike, the manager, came storming out of the back room like a man waking up to a crisis already in progress. What the hell is going on out there? He barked, scanning the room. Kelsey looked up from behind the counter. He's famous, she muttered. Soccer player. Mike gave her a look. That's not just some soccer player. That's Ronaldinho. He's a legend. I know that now. He didn't say anything for a second. His jaw was tight, his gaze calculating. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice so the customers couldn't hear. Did you talk to him? Kelsey hesitated. Yeah, briefly. Briefly like, hello, sir, welcome to our diner. Or briefly like, get lost, I'm too busy to deal with you. She didn't answer. Mike exhaled sharply, rubbing his face with both hands. Kelsey, this could have been the best press this place has had in years. And you... He stopped himself and looked toward the window again. Outside, a small group of fans had gathered around Ronaldinho, like bees around honey. The man was now taking group photos, crouching down to hug a kid in a wheelchair, all of it with that same relaxed grace he'd had in the booth. It wasn't showy. It was natural. That was what unsettled Kelsey the most. He was nice, she said suddenly, her voice smaller than she intended. Mike turned back toward her. I was short with him, she admitted, and he was still nice. Mike didn't respond immediately. He just stared at her, expression unreadable. Then he muttered, We'll talk later. The bell above the door jingled again as more people walked in. This time a young couple holding matching Brazilian flags draped around their shoulders. They looked like they'd sprinted there. The woman walked straight up to the counter, beaming. Is he still here? She asked breathlessly. Kelsey nodded toward the window. He's just outside. The girl clutched her chest, squealing softly before running back outside, dragging her boyfriend with her. Another customer leaned across the counter, phone in hand. Excuse me, can I ask, did he really eat here? Kelsey nodded again. Do you have his receipt? She blinked. What? Like, did he sign anything? A receipt, napkin, anything? That'd be worth something. Kelsey stared at the man. No, he paid in cash. The customer looked mildly disappointed, but still pulled out his phone to record a slow, dramatic pan of the booth where Ronaldinho had eaten. Kelsey stepped away, needing space. She ducked into the kitchen, where the noise of sizzling oil and clanging pans didn't drown out the static in her head. Rosa followed her in, watching her with concern. You okay? I messed up, Kelsey said quietly. Rosa folded her arms. I mean, yeah, but we all do sometimes. This one's different. Rosa leaned against the prep table. You didn't know who he was. That's not the problem. Rosa was silent, letting her speak. I didn't even try to be decent, Kelsey said. I sized him up and wrote him off. And he still tipped me, still smiled. He even apologized for his English. Rosa tilted her head. So, go talk to him. Say sorry. I don't even know if he'd care. That's not the point, Kels. Kelsey leaned back against the wall, shutting her eyes for a moment. The air smelled like onions and fryer oil. The kitchen was hot. She felt heavier than she had in months. When she opened her eyes again, Rosa was still watching her. You should go, Rosa said. Now, before this turns into something you can't fix. Kelsey didn't reply, but the idea lodged itself like a splinter. Outside, The world was changing by the second. People were live streaming, sharing, commenting. She could feel the story slipping out of her hands. And soon, it would belong to everyone else. The heat outside had begun to crawl for the diner's old windows, mingling with the tension hanging thick in the air. Kelsey hadn't stepped out yet. She stood behind the counter, arms crossed, watching the chaos beyond the glass like someone observing a storm rolling in. Ronaldinho was still out there, now surrounded by what had become a sizable gathering. The line between fans and mere onlookers had blurred. People who didn't even know his name were now taking pictures, asking questions, or just recording for the sake of going viral. Inside the diner, things had changed. The regulars who had once kept to their newspapers and bottomless coffee were now craning their necks toward the windows. Some had even started discreetly filming, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever might happen next. Every move Kelsey made seemed to be watched, interpreted, weighed against the new context of what everyone now knew or thought they knew about her. Mike had retreated to the back office again, likely drafting some kind of damage control plan. Rosa had gone silent, working her section with mechanical efficiency. The diner's usual rhythm had fractured, and all eyes seemed to be waiting for one thing: Kelsey's reaction. But she wasn't ready to give them what they wanted. As much as she could feel the guilt gnawing at her from within, every inch of her knowing she had mishandled the situation, there was another part of her that refused to fold. The same stubborn edge that had carried her through months of sleepless nights and unrelenting pressure now flared up in resistance. She had been wrong. She knew that, but the humiliation that was building outside the walls of the diner felt disproportionate. There was something performative about it now, something that made her feel more like a target than a person who'd made a mistake. She didn't like the idea of apologizing just because people expected her to, so she didn't. When Rosa came back behind the counter and softly said, "You should really just go talk to him," Kelsey's response was quiet but firm. "Not right now." Rosa paused, searching her face. "If you wait too long, it's going to look worse." Kelsey didn't flinch. Let it look worse. Rosa sighed but didn't argue. She knew that tone. Minutes later, another group entered the diner. 2 young women and a man, all clearly tourists, all clearly aware of the moment they were walking into. One of the women approached the booth where Ronaldinho had sat, pulled out her phone, and posed in front of the table with an exaggerated smile. The other filmed her. Then they all laughed, sharing something on a screen, before placing a small order just to justify their presence. Kelsey watched from the register, her stomach tightening. This had turned into spectacle. Her failure had become fuel for content. And the longer she remained silent, the more her silence became its own kind of statement, one she wasn't sure she could undo later. Still, she refused to move. She cleaned the same coffee pot 3 times. She wiped a clean counter. She rearranged the napkin holders, anything to avoid the growing pull to step outside and face the man whose quiet decency had unraveled something far more complicated in her. A few more customers filtered in, including a father with a young boy wearing a Brazil jersey. The boy ran toward the window, practically bouncing at the sight of Ronaldinho, then spun back toward the counter. "Miss! Miss!" he shouted. "Did he eat here?" "Right there." Kelsey nodded, guarded. The boy beamed. "That's so cool. My dad says he's one of the best ever. Better than Messi." His dad chuckled behind him. "Don't start arguments in here, bud." The boy turned back to Kelsey. "Did you talk to him? What's he like?" Kelsey hesitated. "He was polite." "Did he sign anything?" "No, he didn't." The boy's excitement never waned. "I hope he comes back inside." Kelsey forced a small smile. "Maybe." The boy ran back to the window, hands pressed against the glass. His joy was pure, unfiltered. It made something twist in her. Why had she been so quick to shut someone like that down? Because she'd been exhausted. Because kindness had started to feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. Because people had stopped surprising her in a good way. But that didn't excuse the way she treated him. And now, every second she stood behind the counter felt like she was digging herself deeper into the hole her pride had carved. She poured another coffee, refilled a glass of water, and cleared a table. But the usual routine had lost its grounding effect. Her hands moved out of muscle memory, but her thoughts were elsewhere, spiraling, tightening, clashing with themselves. 1 minute she wanted to run outside and apologize, fall on her sword. The next, she wanted to scream at the crowd for turning this into a performance. She made her way back toward the corner booth to wipe it down again. A couple seated nearby looked up. "Did he leave a signature?" the woman asked. Kelsey shook her head. "You should have had him sign the table," the man added, chuckling. "Could have sold on eBay." She didn't answer, just kept cleaning. As she stood up, a small folded piece of paper slid from under the ketchup bottle. Not a note, a receipt. Ronaldinho's, apparently, with nothing but a scribbled total. No name, no signature, just the number 40 circled in blue ink. She stared at it for a moment, then tucked it into her apron. And still, she didn't go outside. Instead, she returned to the kitchen again, this time pacing the narrow space between the prep table and the walk-in cooler. The hum of the fridge and the distant chatter from the dining room faded beneath the war inside her. Pride versus guilt, anger versus shame. Then from the front, she heard Rose's voice, low, urgent. "Kels, you might want to come out here." Kelsey stepped out, nerves tightening. But it wasn't Ronaldinho. It was a reporter, a local one, judging by the badge clipped to his shirt. His camera operator stood just behind him, adjusting the lens, both clearly setting up for a shot. They weren't filming yet. Not yet. The reporter glanced toward Kelsey and then at Mike, who had reemerged and was standing stiffly near the register. "I'm from Channel 7. The reporter said, "We heard Ronaldinho Gaúcho was here. Want to get a quick segment. Talk to a few customers, maybe staff, if anyone's willing." Mike hesitated. "We're not really doing interviews right now." Kelsey watched as the camera guy slowly panned across the diner. "No problem." The reporter said, "Already eyeing potential shots. Just a few comments. Folks are curious how it happened. Why he came here of all places. Because he's humble." A customer piped up from a booth. "And he loves pancakes," someone else added. The camera operator grinned and kept filming. Kelsey turned and walked straight back into the kitchen, her face burning. This was not going away. And still, she couldn't bring herself to walk outside and say the words that needed to be said. Maybe tomorrow, she told herself. But a small voice inside already knew. Tomorrow might be too late. By the time the lunch hour approached, the street outside the diner had transformed into something closer to an impromptu fan zone. What had begun as a few curious teenagers and soccer enthusiasts had grown into a legitimate crowd. There were now over 24 people gathered near the entrance, some holding up makeshift signs, others live streaming or speaking into their phones in Portuguese, English, and even Spanish. The sidewalk was no longer just a place for people to pass through. It had become a destination. Ronaldinho remained the quiet center of the unfolding scene. He hadn't left the spot beside the diner's window. Despite the increasing attention, his demeanor never shifted. He didn't act annoyed or overwhelmed. He didn't retreat. He stayed exactly where he was, leaning comfortably against a warm brick wall, engaging with everyone who approached him like each interaction mattered. Kelsey, still inside, watched through the small crack in the blinds at the front of the diner. She had positioned herself just beside the register under the pretense of organizing receipts, but her focus was entirely on the outside. Every time a new fan approached him with a shirt to sign or a child to introduce, she felt something hard pressed deeper into her chest. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was recognition. She was witnessing something rare, a celebrity who carried his fame like it was a responsibility, not a burden, and she had dismissed him as an inconvenience. Inside, the atmosphere was shifting just as rapidly. Customers no longer cared about menus or wait times. Conversation centered on Ronaldinho and the possibility of him stepping back inside. 2 young men sitting at booth 3 had their phones angled toward the window, filming continuously while pretending to sip coffee they hadn't touched in 15 minutes. At table 6, a mother tried unsuccessfully to get her twin daughters to eat their fries. Both girls were too busy pressing their faces to glass, hoping for another glimpse of the man in the yellow jersey. Kelsey's movements had grown more robotic with each passing minute. She served a sandwich without remembering who ordered it. She poured coffee but forgot the cream. Her mind was too fragmented, half stuck in the present chaos, half trapped in the past hours she kept reliving, editing, regretting. Then came the tour bus. It pulled up on the opposite side of the street, painted in bright pastels, with the words Magic City Soccer Tour scrawled across the side. The driver leaned out the window and shouted something in Portuguese, which immediately got the crowd buzzing. Within seconds, more people poured out. Soccer fans from all over Latin America and Europe who, by pure coincidence, had stumbled onto a scene they couldn't believe was real. The crowd doubled in size in less than 5 minutes. Inside the diner, Mike paced behind the counter, checking his phone every 10 seconds. Rosa was answering questions from a curious reporter who had come back with a cameraman and was now setting up for a second take. Even the cook, who rarely emerged from the kitchen during the rush, had poked his head out to see what the commotion was about. Kelsey stood still, watching, listening. Her hands were trembling slightly. Finally, the diner door opened. Ronaldinho stepped inside again, flanked by a few fans who respectfully stayed near the entrance, allowing him space. His presence quieted the diner for a beat, as if the room itself inhaled. He didn't speak loudly or demand attention. He simply nodded, smiling at the customers, many of whom erupted into soft applause. Some stood, some tried to approach, but he raised a hand gently to indicate he wouldn't be staying long. Kelsey was frozen behind the counter. He turned slightly, his eyes finding hers. There was no accusation in his expression, just the same calm he had carried all morning. He nodded once, acknowledging her, and turned to Mike. "I come say thank you again," he said in that slow, warm cadence. "Very kind place. Good people." Mike, clearly unsure how to respond, just nodded and offered a quick handshake. "You're welcome here anytime, sir. Anytime." Ronaldinho chuckled, gave a few more waves to the crowd inside, then turned to leave. But before he reached the door, he paused. He looked back at Kelsey. This time, he spoke directly to her. "Your diner is lucky to have you." She didn't know how to respond. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. All she could manage was a quiet, "Thank you," barely audible over the murmurs spreading through the room. He smiled again, and then he was gone. The crowd outside welcomed him like a hero returning from exile. A roar of excitement surged through the street, echoing off the surrounding buildings. Kelsey watched as he signed more autographs, posed for more photos, laughed with strangers. The noise blurred behind the glass, distant and surreal. The moment had passed, but the weight of it remained. Inside, the attention turned slowly back to her. One customer offered her a sympathetic look. Another gave her a nod, something between encouragement and curiosity. And somewhere in the corner of the diner, a tourist quietly uploaded a video to social media, a clip that showed Ronaldinho entering, glancing toward the counter, and delivering his soft-spoken comment to Kelsey before exiting again. By the time she returned to her duties, that video had already begun to spread. It would only be a matter of time before the rest of the story followed. The buzz of conversation had shifted from casual curiosity to barely concealed gossip. Within the walls of Bayfront Diner, the regular clatter of plates and silverware continued, but it was undercut by the tension humming just beneath the surface. For Kelsey, every voice, every glance, every tap of a smartphone screen felt like a quiet accusation. The line between attention and scrutiny had vanished. By early afternoon, the crowd outside had begun to thin as Ronaldinho moved on, likely to another obligation, another unexpected stop on whatever brought him to Miami. But the storm he left behind was far from over. It was just beginning to form in digital space. Hashtags starting to trend, local influencers posting stories, and the video of Ronaldinho's brief re-entry into the diner had already passed 10,000 views. Kelsey didn't need to check the numbers. She could feel the shift in energy all around her. Mike had disappeared into the back office again, right after Ronaldinho left. For a moment, she hoped he would stay there, let things cool down. But that was wishful thinking. At precisely 2:30, the office door creaked open, and he stepped out with his phone in one hand and a stormy look in his eyes. His jaw was tight, and he didn't say a word as he marched across the floor, nodding briefly at Rosa to cover the counter. "Kelsey," he said, not raising his voice, but leaving no room for debate. "Back office. Now." She didn't argue. She followed him past the kitchen, down the narrow hallway, and into the cramped room that served as his office. A space crammed with filing cabinets, outdated equipment, and laminated posters about food safety. Mike closed the door behind them and turned around with the full weight of the situation in his posture. "Sit," he said. She did. He didn't speak right away. He pulled up something on his phone, turned the screen toward her, and hit play. It was a now viral clip. Ronaldinho stepping back inside the diner, smiling at the customers, exchanging a few kind words with Mike, and then directing his attention to her. "Your diner is lucky to have you," he said again on the video. Even through the pixelation and poor lighting, the softness in his voice was unmistakable. Mike paused the video, lowered the phone, and met her gaze. "You want to tell me what the hell happened this morning?" Kelsey's mouth felt dry. "I didn't know who he was." "Yeah," Mike snapped. "That part's pretty clear. But I'm not asking if you recognize him. I'm asking what you said to him. Because whatever it was, the internet is already dissecting it. And guess whose name is starting to pop up in the comments?" He held the phone up again and swiped through a few screenshots. One was a blurry image of her at the counter, caught mid-sentence. Another was a text overlay on the video that read, "She had no idea she was talking to a legend." A third one was worse. Someone had added captions that twisted her words, paraphrasing them to make her sound crueler than she had been, though not by much. Kelsey's stomach dropped. "I was rude," she admitted. "He asked about the food, and I shut him down. I thought he was just another." Mike raised a hand. "Stop. I don't want excuses. I want to know what you're going to do about it." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "You think this is just going to fade?" he said. "We had more foot traffic in one day than we've had in 2 months. Local news has called twice. People are tagging our location online, like it's a landmark now. And in the middle of it all is you." She flinched. Mike exhaled slowly and leaned against the desk. "Look, Kels, I'm not saying you're a bad person. You've been with us 5 years. You've shown up, worked double shifts, taken care of customers who didn't deserve your patience. I get it. You're tired. Life's been hard." She nodded, unsure if she should thank him or apologize. "But this moment, it's bigger than you," he continued. "It's bigger than whatever kind of day you were having. And you can't just stand there acting like nothing happened." Silence settled in the room. "I tried to tell myself it wasn't that bad," Kelsey finally said. "That maybe people would forget by tomorrow." But then he came back, and he smiled, and he said that. "Yeah," Mike said, nodding. "He did. And you're lucky he did. Because if he had walked out angry or said anything negative, this place would already be on the blacklist of every blog in town." Kelsey stared at the floor. "What do you want me to do?" He crossed his arms. "You have 2 choices. You can go out there and talk to a reporter who's probably still lurking around, give a sincere apology, and let people see you're owning your mistake. Or you can take a few days off and let this blow over, though I can't promise it will." She looked up, startled. "You're asking me to go public?" "I'm asking you to take responsibility," he said. "We live in a world where these things don't stay local. You know that." Kelsey took a deep breath. "What if I make it worse? Then at least you tried. Right now you're doing nothing, and that's turning people against you." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Mike added, softer, "You're not the first person to mess up, but if you want to keep working here, you need to show people that you know how to make it right." Kelsey stood slowly. Her knees felt weak, but her spine was straight. "I need a minute," she said. Mike gave her a slow nod. "You've got one." She stepped out of the office and walked back toward the front of the diner. The reporter was still there, leaning against a booth, chatting with one of the teenage customers who had stayed for hours hoping to see Ronaldinho again. The camera was off for now, but ready. The world, too, seemed ready, waiting for her to step forward, to say something, to acknowledge the gap between who she had been that morning and who she could be now. Rosa met her at the counter. "You okay?" she asked gently. "No," Kelsey admitted. but I know what I have to do. The late afternoon sun had begun its slow descent over Miami, casting long shadows across the sidewalk and bathing the front of the diner in a hazy, golden light. The earlier frenzy had started to quiet down, but a lingering hum of interest still hung in the air. A few small groups of fans remained outside, checking their phones for any updates, hoping for one last glimpse of the man who had unexpectedly turned a sleepy diner into a trending topic. Kelsey stood just inside the entrance, her arms wrapped tightly across her chest. Her apron was wrinkled, her ponytail slightly undone, and her face carried the weight of a long, unraveling day. Rose had offered to cover the counter, and Mike had retreated to the office again, giving her space to make a choice she now knew could not be avoided. The apology wasn't about saving her job anymore. It was about facing what she had become numb to, the way her exhaustion had slowly carved cracks in her empathy, and how easily she had let assumptions replace grace. She had allowed a moment of stress to turn into something cruel, and the man she had judged so quickly had responded not with anger, but with quiet dignity. She opened the door, stepping out into the warmth. Ronaldinho was sitting alone on a nearby bench, legs crossed, elbows resting on his knees, surrounded by the occasional passing fan, but largely left to himself for the moment. A pair of teenage boys were standing nearby with their phones out, whispering excitedly, but they kept their distance. He seemed to be enjoying the breeze, watching people come and go like a man without a schedule. Kelsey walked slowly toward him, her steps measured, her thoughts racing. As she approached, he looked up, not startled, just curious. When he recognized her, his smile returned, soft and unforced. "Hello again," he said. She stopped a few feet in front of him, hands in her apron pockets, uncertain of how to begin. She took a breath. "I owe you an apology." Ronaldinho tilted his head, still smiling. "I was rude. Earlier. Really rude. I made assumptions about you. I was tired, frustrated, and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it." He said nothing, just listened. "I didn't recognize you, but that's not the point. You didn't do anything wrong. You were polite and I wasn't." She paused, searching for his eyes. "And then you came back in. And you said something kind to me after all that. That meant more than I can explain." Ronaldinho leaned back slightly on the bench, studying her for a beat before replying. "Sometimes people have heavy days," he said, his voice calm. "It's not about what you said. It's about what you feel now." Kelsey swallowed hard. "I feel ashamed." He nodded, then smiled again, gently, warmly, without a trace of condescension. "That means you are learning." She blinked, unprepared for the simplicity of the response. There was no lecture, no passive-aggressive forgiveness, no hint of resentment, just a calm, sincere acceptance. "I appreciate you saying that," she murmured, "and for being so gracious. You didn't have to be." Ronaldinho looked out toward the street, where a few more people were walking past, some slowing down when they saw him. Then he turned back to her. "Kindness is a choice. Always." They sat in silence for a few seconds, the moment hanging softly between them. "I've seen videos of you with fans," Kelsey said suddenly. "Even after everything, you still stop for every kid, every selfie. You don't act like it's a burden." He chuckled, that signature glint in his eye. "It is never a burden to be kind. I had many people who were kind to me when I was young. I remember them more than the goals I scored." She nodded, feeling something shift inside her. "I think I forgot how to be that kind," she admitted. "Somewhere along the way, I let the job, the stress, everything get to me, and I started thinking of people as problems, not people." Ronaldinho gave a small shrug. "We all get tired. But you came outside. You said sorry. That matters." Kelsey looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I don't expect you to care, but I needed to say it. For me, I guess, to know I didn't just walk away and pretend like it didn't matter." He smiled wider now, that easy, familiar expression that millions around the world had seen on stadium screens and YouTube highlights. But here, just a few feet away, it felt more human than ever. "I care," he said, "because you do." Another silence passed, comfortable this time. She took a breath, steadier now. Would you be okay if I took a photo with you?" He laughed lightly. "Of course." She pulled out her phone, hands no longer shaking, and he stood beside her. The teenage boys nearby rushed to volunteer as photographers, delighted to take the picture. They snapped a few, joking with Ronaldinho and Kelsey both. And when it was done, he gave her one last nod. "I hope your day is better now," he said. "It already is." With that, he turned and walked away slowly, stopping to greet a family just arriving from a rideshare car. He knelt down to speak to a little girl in a soccer jersey, sign her autograph book, and then posed for a photo with her mother. The smile never left his face. Kelsey remained still, watching the scene unfold. But the heaviness she'd carried earlier was gone. In its place was something quieter, stillness, maybe, not relief, not yet, but the beginning of it. As she walked back toward the diner, she passed by the reporter again. He noticed her return and raised an eyebrow, lifting his camera slightly in question. She gave a nod, small but resolute. She was ready to speak, not just to the media, but to the world, and more importantly, to herself. By mid-evening, the diner had quieted, but only outwardly. Inside, Bayfront Diner buzzed with an energy that turned from tense to electric. The late-day crowd was mostly locals and a few curious passers-by, drawn by word-of-mouth live streams and social feeds buzzing about the Ronaldinho Diner incident. For the regular customers, this strange twilight hour felt like a soft exhale after a storm. For Kelsey, it felt like the calm before a much bigger one. She leaned against the counter, glancing toward the booth where a faded "Welcome to Bayfront Diner" sign framed gentle light. Her shift was ending in an hour, but she found herself unable to leave, in part because she wasn't sure where to go, and in part because she felt a strange responsibility lingering. The apology she delivered had been honest, but was it enough? A whisper of movement caught her attention. The reporter who had been hovering earlier slipped in again, followed by another, this time a photographer from a popular local tabloid, camera slung around her neck, not yet active. They approached the counter together. The reporter tugged lightly at Kelsey's sleeve. "Mind if we record a quick interview?" Her voice was calm, professional, not predatory, yet Kelsey's heart slammed in her chest. She looked at Mike, who hovered nearby, half reluctant but also surprisingly encouraging. He nodded faintly. Kelsey squared her shoulders and let out a soft breath. "Okay." They moved to a quiet corner, near the window. The photographer lifted her camera. The reporter raised a small hand mic with discreet red light. "Kelsey," the reporter began, "we've seen your apology video. Your message is getting thousands of views. How are you feeling right now?" Kelsey paused, her eyes drifting toward the window where fans had cleared, leaving the street empty except for the glow of street lamps and the occasional passing car. The stillness was unexpected, given the digital whirlwind she'd set in motion hours ago. "Honestly," she started slowly, "I feel humbled and grateful. I still can't believe how a quiet, ordinary shift can spiral into something this big." The camera flashed softly as the photographer captured the moment. Kelsey's cheeks warmed, but she stayed composed. "I was wrong to judge. I let my fatigue and frustration dictate how I treated someone who didn't deserve it. But he responded with so much kindness. It forced me to see myself. I'm proud of the apology I gave, though earning back that trust will take more than a few words." The reporter nodded, sensing the sincerity. "How are your co-workers handling the attention?" Rosa, who had circled back quietly, appeared at the edge of the frame with a reassuring presence. Mike, trailing behind her, offered a small, supportive smile. Kelsey looked at them, the reality of support settling across her shoulders like a gentle hand. "They've been incredible," she said. "Mike, let me take this moment to do the right thing. Rosa, she's been there every step, reminding me who I am when I can't remember." The reporter clicked her pen, turned the page in a small notebook. "And to viewers who might be going through their own rough day, what do you want to say to them?" Kelsey's voice softened, focus sharpening. "There's grace in admitting when you're wrong. It doesn't expose weakness. It reveals courage. If this tiny diner in Miami can become a reminder that it's never too late to apologize, maybe that's worth something." The camera clicked again. This time, the photographer aimed for a wider shot. Kelsey, the counter with its swapped receipts and syrup stains, the sign behind her, a moment of reconciliation etched in still frames. Afterward, she walked back behind the counter. Rosa met her with a gentle nod. "Heard you spoke well," Rosa whispered, small pride in her tone. "Felt like I finally did what needed to be done," Kelsey replied quietly. Mike re-entered from the back, phone in hand. He caught her eye and motioned her close. She stepped halfway into the kitchen, and he showed her his screen. "Your apology video has already been shared by a local news outlet," he said softly. "And they basically framed it as the waitress who apologized to soccer legend Ronaldinho. It's trending." Kelsey stared at the screen, comments pouring in. "That's called humanity. We need more of this." A lump formed in her throat. Mike continued, more quietly now. "In fact, someone just reached out from a local children's sports program. They're hosting an event next week, and they'd like to invite you." Kelsey blinked. Why would they do that? He let out a slow breath. Because they want someone who made a mistake, owned up to it, and still managed to be kind afterward. They think that speaks volumes. Her heart pounded, not with fear or dread, but with something else, the possibility of purpose. Back in the dining room, customers had finished their meals. Some looked up and offered brief smiles of approval, silent acknowledgments that she'd done something bigger than serving plates. At the end of her shift, she stepped outside into the humid night. The lights of the diner glowed warmly behind her. For the first time that day, the world felt expansive again, full of second chances and unspoken apologies still waiting to be offered. A notification popped up on her phone. The apology video had hit over 100,000 views. She sank down onto the curb, phone in hand, silence all around, and felt unmistakably that this was just the beginning of something meaningful. The following morning, the sky over Miami was streaked with orange and pink, and a thin mist hung over the streets as if the city itself were still waking up. Bayfront Diner opened as usual at 7 o'clock. But by then, the ripple effect of the previous day had already reached new depths. The incident was no longer just a viral clip or a trending apology. It had now entered the realm of deeper human stories, ones that reshaped perception and demanded reflection. Kelsey arrived before the door was unlocked. She hadn't slept much. Her phone had vibrated throughout the night with comment notifications, reposts, and direct messages. Some were harsh, others encouraging, but one stood out among them. A link sent to her around 4 a.m, accompanied by the simple caption, "Maybe this will help." She hadn't clicked it right away. Now, as she sat behind the counter waiting for the first customers of the day, she opened the link. It was an article recently published by a Brazilian journalist for a major Sao Paulo outlet, translated into English for an international audience. The headline read, "Ronaldinho's quiet mission in Miami, the star who came to give, not receive." Kelsey began to read. The piece detailed how Ronaldinho had flown into Miami just 2 days earlier, not for vacation, not for business, and not for press appearances. He had arrived to attend a private, invitation-only charity event organized by an international foundation that promoted sports inclusion for underprivileged children in Latin America. The event, taking place across multiple Miami neighborhoods, was aimed at launching a new soccer-based mentorship program that would offer scholarships, training resources, and coaching for low-income communities. According to the article, Ronaldinho had requested no press coverage for his arrival, no cameras, no entourages. He had flown commercial, no VIP lounges. He had stayed in a modest boutique hotel near Brick Hill, declining luxury accommodations offered by event sponsors. The journalist explained how Ronaldinho had wanted this visit to be about the children, not about him. The only condition for his participation had been that the focus remain on the cause. Kelsey's eyes slowed as she reached the next paragraph. The reporter revealed that the diner incident, unbeknownst to the world at the time, had occurred just hours before Ronaldinho was scheduled to visit a local sports center for a private, closed-door session with youth athletes. He had not been there for a public appearance. He had gone simply to connect. He'd spent the afternoon after the diner visit training with kids who had never owned cleats. Some wore torn sneakers. Some had arrived by bus from shelters. He had played with them, laughed with them, taught them basic ball control, shared stories from his youth growing up in Porto Alegre. There were no photos from the session, no tweets, just a quiet documentation of those who had witnessed it, now shared only because the media spotlight had been unintentionally pointed in his direction. The article ended with a quote from one of the children who had attended the clinic. "He made us feel important. He didn't talk about trophies. He asked about our dreams." Kelsey lowered her phone slowly, her throat tight. She turned to Rosa, who had just arrived and was preparing the morning coffee pots. "You read the article?" Kelsey asked quietly. Rosa glanced over her shoulder and nodded. "Yeah, this morning. Changed how I saw the whole thing. I didn't think there was more to the story," Kelsey said. "But now it feels like everything I miss about him wasn't just who he was, but why he was even here. He wasn't here to be seen," Rosa replied. "He was here to serve." The words hit with quiet force. By 9 o'clock, customers started trickling in again. Some were new, drawn by curiosity. Others were returning guests, familiar faces from the community. One older man in a baseball cap and linen shirt sat at the counter and asked gently, "You're the young lady who apologized, right?" Kelsey nodded, unsure of his tone. The man smiled and pulled out his phone. "I read the piece this morning. You see what he was really doing in Miami?" "I did." The man paused. "You know what stuck with me? That he didn't correct you. Not once. He never told you who he was. He let your version of him stand." "I've thought about that too," she admitted. The man sipped his coffee. "It's rare these days. Most people would have snapped back, made sure everyone knew exactly how famous they were. He just let you talk, like he didn't need to win." Kelsey remained silent for a moment. "I don't think he came here to win anything." "No," the man agreed. "He came here to give. And maybe that's why he was exactly the person who could teach the rest of us something." Later that day, as Kelsey stepped out for a short break, she noticed someone had taped a printed copy of the article to the diner window, just beside the entrance. Below it, someone had handwritten in thick black marker, "Legend on and OFF the field." Throughout the afternoon, more people stopped to read it. Inside, a new atmosphere had begun to take shape. The diner wasn't just buzzing, it was transforming. Customers asked questions, shared the article, talked about how they, too, had misjudged people in their own lives. It had become less about the celebrity, more about the reflection. By early evening, Kelsey received a message from the same sports charity mentioned in the article. They thanked her for how she had handled her mistake and invited her to volunteer at their next community event, one that Ronaldinho was again expected to attend, if quietly. The message ended with a single line. It would be good for the kids to see someone who knows how to grow. She stared at that sentence for a long time, letting it settle. That night, as she closed out the register and helped Rosa with the last wipe down of tables, she caught herself glancing at the booth where Ronaldinho had first sat. Nothing about the table had changed. The vinyl still cracked, the edge still chipped, but it felt transformed now. It had become a symbol of something greater than regret. It had become the start of understanding. Kelsey didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something unexpected. Peace. And somewhere out there was a man who had quietly stepped into her life, accepted her at her lowest, and walked away without judgment. He had shown her what grace looked like, and now it was her turn to carry it forward. The next morning, Kelsey arrived at the diner earlier than usual. The air outside was heavy with humidity, a curtain of moisture blurring the distant skyline. Inside, however, everything was sharp, clear. The calm she had felt the previous night had evolved into clarity, a sense that she stood at a threshold, and what came next would be entirely up to her. Mike was already there, sitting at one of the booths near the kitchen entrance, laptop open, reading glasses slipping down his nose. The moment she walked in, he closed the screen and gestured for her to sit. His expression was unreadable, not tense, not relaxed, just measured. She slid into the booth across from him and waited. "I've been up since 5, he said. "Phone's been ringing nonstop." She nodded. "I figured." "Your apology video?" It's been shared over 300,000 times. The article from the Brazilian outlet, that's got its own traction now, too. People are stitching your clip with clips of him talking to kids, even old footage from matches. Kelsey's pulse quickened, but she said nothing. Mike leaned back, folding his arms. And now, we're in the middle of something bigger than this diner, bigger than pancakes and coffee refills. And whether you like it or not, you're at the center of it. She swallowed. I didn't ask to be, she said softly. I know, but that doesn't change the fact that you are. He paused, studying her. I got a call this morning from a news network in Sao Paulo. They want to do a remote interview with you. Nothing fancy, just 5 minutes. But they want to talk about what it means to own up to a mistake in a world that rarely forgives. Kelsey blinked, the weight of it settling across her chest. Also, Mike continued, the same charity that invited Ronaldinho, they want you to be part of their volunteer team. You'd help with the next sports initiative in Liberty City. Local kids, real stories, real impact. He paused again. But they asked for a public commitment, a video, something that shows you're in it for more than optics, that this isn't just about the fallout, it's about growth. Kelsey looked down at her hands, palms resting flat on the table. She felt the subtle tremor in her fingers. It wasn't fear exactly, it was the pressure of possibility. For the first time in a long time, her next step would not be determined by exhaustion or survival, but by choice. Mike waited. Finally, she looked up. I'll do it, she said. Not because it fixes anything. Not because I want to be in the spotlight. But because if even one person sees this and decides to pause before judging someone else, then maybe it's worth it. Mike nodded, almost imperceptibly. You'll need a film today, he said. They want to post it before the weekend. She agreed. A few hours later, after the breakfast rush had ended and the diner quieted, Kelsey stood in the same booth where Ronaldinho had once sat. Rosa held her phone steady, acting as camera operator, while Mike adjusted the lights above to reduce the shadows. Kelsey stood still, took a deep breath, and spoke. My name is Kelsey Thompson. I'm a waitress here in Miami, and recently I made a mistake. A public one. I judged someone based on how they looked. I dismissed kindness. I forgot that every person who walks through our doors carries a story. She paused. And then that person turned out to be someone extraordinary, but not because he's famous, because of how he responded. With grace, with humility, with forgiveness. She glanced briefly at Rosa behind the phone. I'm not proud of how I acted, but I am proud of how I've chosen to respond since. I want to be someone who listens, who learns, and who leads with kindness, even on the hard days. She drew a breath. And that's why I'm volunteering with the same organization Ronaldinho came to support. Because no matter what mistakes we've made, there's always a way forward. And sometimes, the best way to honor someone's patience is to turn it into purpose. Rosa ended the recording, eyes shimmering. Mike gave her a firm nod of approval. Within the hour, the clip was sent to the charity. Within the next, it was posted on their official account. By sunset, it had been viewed more than 50,000 times. That evening, Kelsey stayed behind to clean up after the final customers had left. The diner was quiet again, the city outside glowing with neon reflections across puddles of recent rain. She moved from booth to booth, wiping down surfaces, stacking menus, realigning chairs. At Ronaldinho's table, she paused. The laminated menu still had a tiny smear of syrup from the day he had visited. She left it there. Some things weren't meant to be cleaned away. By the next morning, the video Kelsey had recorded in the booth had reached far beyond what anyone at Bayfront Diner anticipated. The charity's social media post, captioned with the words, "Kindness comes full circle," had been picked up by both English-speaking and Brazilian media. Influencers, sports personalities, and even a few minor celebrities had shared it, adding personal anecdotes about Ronaldinho or their own reflections on grace, judgment, and humility. But nothing compared to what came next. It was just past 10 o'clock in the morning when Rosa, who had been on break, came rushing back into the diner from the sidewalk, holding her phone in both hands like it contained breaking news. "Kelsey," she called breathless, "you need to see this. Right now." Kelsey looked up from where she'd been organizing the takeout station and crossed the floor quickly. Rosa held out her phone. On the screen was Ronaldinho's official Instagram account. It had over 70 million followers. And at the top of his feed was a new video, Kelsey's. He had reposted it. The caption read, in both Portuguese and English, "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow. Respect to Kelsey." Just beneath the caption were two emojis, Ronaldinho's signature salute and a soccer ball, and then hundreds of thousands of likes and a rapidly growing comment section. Kelsey stared, stunned. "He posted it?" she asked, disbelieving. Rosa nodded, a grin slowly forming. "Not only posted, it's the only thing he's posted this week." Mike appeared from the back, drawn by the noise. Rosa quickly filled him in, and he let out a low whistle. "This is bigger than a news cycle," he said. "This is a narrative now." Kelsey didn't speak. She simply took a seat at the counter and read the caption again, not because she hadn't understood the first time, but because something had felt like both closure and a new beginning. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow. In the hours that followed, her phone became nearly unusable. Notifications flooded in nonstop. Strangers messaged her to thank her. Some admitted they'd judged her harshly before and now saw her differently. A few even shared stories of moments they had spoken out of turn, failed to offer kindness, and regretted it. But the most surprising wave of messages came from people outside the United States, Brazil, Argentina, Portugal, even part of Africa and Asia. People who had followed Ronaldinho's career for years and were now moved not by his footwork or goals, but by the quiet way he had responded to being mistreated. It wasn't just a redemption arc. It was a shared reckoning. By noon, reporters had arrived again, this time asking for follow-up interviews. Kelsey declined. The video said what it needed to say. She wasn't interested in becoming a figurehead for viral remorse. She just wanted to work her shift, clear her conscience, and, if possible, be better. Mid-afternoon, while taking a late lunch break outside behind a diner, she received a text from an unknown number. There was no name attached, just a single message. "He saw you." And beneath it, a photo. It was taken from a distance, clearly not meant for press, just a quiet moment captured by someone who happened to be nearby. The photo showed Ronaldinho standing beside a mural in Little Haiti, surrounded by a few children, all of them smiling. But in his hand, faintly visible, was a printout of the charity's social media post, the one with her face on it. Folded once, but not hidden. He had carried it with him. Kelsey didn't know who had sent the message. There was no response when she replied, but she didn't need confirmation. She sat there for a long time with the phone in her lap, unsure of what to feel. There were no fireworks, no public meeting, no stage reunion for cameras, just that quiet photo, and the knowledge that it had taken her words with him into the world. Later that evening, the diner was unusually calm for a Thursday. The rush had come early, fueled by the news of Ronaldinho's post, and now only a few tables remained occupied. One of the booths was filled with college students discussing the story excitedly. Another had an older woman reading a newspaper with a headline, "Soccer legend shares Waitress's message of growth." Kelsey, tired but composed, filled water glasses, took an order for 2 tuna melts, and moved through the diner with practiced ease. But something was different now. Her posture was lighter, her smile real. A teenage girl sitting with her mother waved her over softly when she passed by. "Excuse me," the girl said, shy. "Are you Kelsey, the one from the video?" Kelsey nodded, expecting another round of questions, but the girl just smiled. "Thank you. I was having a hard time with a friend. I think I want to say sorry now. Because of you." Kelsey blinked. "That means a lot. I hope it goes well." She returned to the kitchen and leaned against the prep counter for a moment, exhaling. Rosa entered behind her, pulling off her gloves. "I heard about the text," Rosa said quietly. "The photo." "Yeah. You okay?" Kelsey nodded. "I am. It's strange. I was so scared about what people would say. But now, I think I'm more scared of going back to who I was before." "You won't," Rosa said. "You've already changed." That night, As Kelsey walked home, the city seemed quieter. The noise of it all, the internet, the comments, the interviews, had faded behind her like distant waves. What remained was something else. The awareness that even in public mistakes, something private could grow. Not just shame, but character. And as she turned the corner toward her apartment, her phone buzzed one last time. It was another message. No name, just a quote. Your strength isn't in being perfect. It's in being honest when you're not. No response came when she replied, but it didn't matter. She already understood. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, just after breakfast rush at Bayfront Diner had died down. Kelsey was seated in the back corner booth, sipping from a lukewarm cup of coffee while catching up on table orders. Rosa was restocking condiments. Mike was in the back, fixing a flickering kitchen light for the third time that month. The message came not through social media, not as a text, but as a neatly sealed envelope delivered by courier. The delivery person didn't say much, just asked for Kelsey by name, handed the envelope with a quiet nod, and disappeared back into Miami heat. Kelsey turned the envelope over in her hands. It was cream-colored, thick, the kind used for formal events or wedding invitations. Her name was printed in delicate handwriting on the front. No return address. She tore it open and pulled out a folded piece of stationery. The letterhead at the top read, Instituto Lendas Vivas, the Brazilian Sports Foundation tied to Ronaldinho's recent charitable work. Her hands stilled. She read slowly, line by line. The letter expressed gratitude for her public growth, for owning her mistakes with sincerity, and for inspiring others by embracing responsibility. It acknowledged her apology video, Ronaldinho's repost, and the overwhelming global response. Then, in the second half, came the unexpected part. The Institute was hosting a community sports day in Miami that weekend, a collaboration between local youth organizations and international athletes. It would feature soccer workshops, mentorship circles, and panel discussions. And they wanted her there, not as a guest, as a volunteer. Specifically, they asked her to help with the welcome team, greeting families, checking in attendees, and most notably, accompanying the young girls' soccer group throughout the day. The final line of the letter read, Kindness, like greatness, is built through consistency. Your journey reflects that. We would be honored to have you join us. She lowered the letter slowly, her pulse quickening. Rosa, curious from across the counter, walked over. Something good? She asked. Kelsey held the letter out wordlessly. Rosa read it in silence, her expression shifting from curiosity to surprise, and finally into something proud. You're going, right? Kelsey hesitated. I want to, but I'm not sure I belong in that kind of space. These are athletes, mentors, role models. Rosa shook her head gently. You apologized. You took accountability. You made space for change. That's what real role models do. Later that day, during a break, Kelsey stepped outside and called a number listed in the invitation. A coordinator answered, warm and professional, thrilled that she had called. They confirmed the event details. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock sharp, at a youth recreation field in Liberty City. Kelsey confirmed her participation. By Saturday, the weather was bright and clear, a rare break from the sticky heat that often blanketed the city. She arrived early, dressed in a plain white t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, her hair tied back. Volunteers wore matching lanyards and t-shirts stamped with the Institute's logo, a golden outline of a soccer ball with human hands cradling it from below. The field was alive with energy. Kids in bright-colored uniforms sprinted across the grass. Some practiced dribbling drills. Others giggled as they chased each other before the official activities began. Tables were set up with water bottles, sports gear, and name tags. A small stage had been assembled at one end of the field, where speakers and organizers gave welcoming remarks. Kelsey's station was near the front gate. She stood beside a table, checking in families and helping distribute name tags and wristbands. The girls' group arrived next, about 15 girls between the ages of 7 and 14, most of them wearing jerseys that were too big and shoes that didn't quite fit. Some were shy, some loud, all buzzing with anticipation. She spent the morning with them, guiding them from activity to activity, helping them form teams, passing out snacks, tying loose shoelaces. At first, the girls were hesitant around her, unsure of who she was or why she was there. But after a while, they warmed to her. One of the older girls, named Daniela, asked what position Kelsey had played as a kid. Kelsey laughed. "I never played soccer." Daniela looked surprised. "Then why are you here?" Kelsey thought for a moment. "Because I made a mistake, and someone taught me how to be better. Now I want to help however I can." That seemed to satisfy her. As the morning wore on, workshops led by local coaches and guest athletes took over the field. Kelsey watched as the girls learned new drills, practiced passing, and listened attentively during mentoring circles. There was no sense of hierarchy here, just community, support, and shared joy. And then, in the early afternoon, the energy shifted again. A small cheer rose from the far side of the field. Heads turned. The coaches straightened. The kids, mid-game, froze and squinted into the sun. Ronaldinho had arrived. No entourage, no press, just him in a plain blue jersey, cleats in hand, greeting staff with a hug and kneeling to speak to the nearest child. One by one, he made his way through the field, laughing, joining drills, juggling soccer balls with ease, and taking time with each group. When he reached the girls' station, the kids swarmed him. Daniela was the first to hand him a ball. He juggled it casually, then passed it back. The rest of the girls followed suit. In seconds, the area had become a blur of movement, laughter, and shouts of awe. Kelsey stood off to the side, watching. He noticed her. For a moment, their eyes met. He gave a subtle nod, a smile barely there, but unmistakable. She returned the gesture, not needing words. He was doing what he had come to do, and she was finally in a place where she understood what that meant. At the end of the day, as the sun began to dip and the event wound down, Kelsey sat on a bench near the parking lot, watching families gather their things and volunteers begin to clean up. One of the organizers approached her with a thank you envelope. Inside was a photo, printed on thick paper, of her standing among the girls during the morning drill session. They had captured it candidly. She hadn't even noticed. The note on the back was simple: inspired by kindness, carried by grace. She held the photo for a long time before slipping it into her bag, and as she left the field that evening, she knew something with quiet certainty. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something she hadn't known she was missing. Back at the diner, everything had returned to its usual pace. The crowds had thinned. The press had moved on. Ronaldinho was no longer in Miami. His charity visit completed. His name now tied not just to the field, but to something quieter, more human. The neon hum of Bayfront Diner's sign flickered over the sidewalk just as it had for decades. Tourists came and went, curious but no longer wide-eyed. The kitchen bell rang on cue. Coffee was poured. Pancakes flipped. But something within the walls had changed. And Kelsey had changed with it. Her routine resumed. Early mornings, long shifts, quick refills, exact change, but she moved through it differently. Her posture was looser. Her smiles more genuine. She had always worked hard, but now she worked with intention. Every interaction, even the smallest one, held the weight of possibility. She had stopped assuming, stopped rushing to define people by their shoes or accents or how slowly they scan a menu. A few weeks after the community event, a young man entered the diner mid-afternoon. He was tall, thin, carrying a duffel bag and wearing headphones. He looked lost. Kelsey approached him, menu in hand, and asked if he needed help. He removed one earbud, looked around, and asked in broken English if this was a place where Ronaldinho met the lady. Kelsey smiled. "Yes, it is." He nodded, visibly relieved. "I came from Fort Lauderdale. I play football. In college, I wanted to see it." She pointed to the booth in the corner, where the original encounter had unfolded. That's where he Saturday. The young man went over, slid into the booth reverently, and sat for a moment without speaking. Eventually, he ordered coffee. Nothing else. He stayed for almost an hour. Before leaving, he asked if she was the same waitress. "I am." He held out his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for showing us we can change." The word stayed with her long after he left. Over time, other subtle signs of impact appeared. A woman from out of state left a note on her receipt that read, "Your story reminded me to call my sister and fix things." A high school teacher requested permission to show her apology video in a media ethics class. A journalist reached out requesting an interview, not about Ronaldinho, but about emotional accountability in the digital age. Kelsey declined most of the media, not out of shame, but because the lesson didn't belong to the spotlight anymore. It belonged to the small spaces where character was quietly rebuilt. One evening, after closing, Mike stayed behind to help mop the floors. As they worked in silence, he eventually said, "You know, we'd had over 20 people ask about you this month? Tourists, locals, even that nonprofit sent someone by to say hi." Kelsey, bent over the mop bucket, smiled. "You regretting not firing me yet?" He chuckled. "I'd be an idiot if I had. Besides, the attention hasn't hurt business." They finished cleaning. As they locked the doors at night, Mike turned back and added, "You've done good, Kels." She nodded, knowing the weight behind those words. By the end of the month, a new frame appeared on the diner's wall, hung near the register. Beside a faded photo of the original owners and an autographed snapshot of a famous local boxer was a picture of Kelsey and Ronaldinho standing together at the community event. In it, he was laughing, caught mid-motion, and she was looking at him with a kind of calm pride. Two people whose lives had crossed not through design, but by circumstance and grace. Customers noticed it quickly. One child asked who the man was. Kelsey answered, "He's one of the greatest soccer players ever." "And what about the lady?" "She's just a waitress," Kelsey replied. But Rosa, who overheard, corrected her with a grin. "No, she's a reminder." Kelsey rolled her eyes, but didn't protest. Later that week, while closing, she noticed something folded under the napkin dispenser at Ronaldinho's old booth. It was a note, no name, just 3 lines written in neat print. "I visited because I wanted to see the place. I left remembering the lesson. Thank you for showing what real change looks like." Kelsey read it twice, then tucked it away in her apron. Sometimes the lesson wasn't loud. It didn't go viral. It didn't trend or get retweeted by millions. Sometimes it lived in moments like that, a silent thank you from a stranger who had needed to see that people could fall and rise again without pretending either didn't matter. And every time Kelsey reached for a menu or filled a cup, she carried that lesson with her. Not because she had to, but because now she chose to.